They say a king must be made of steel. But once, in the halls of France, there reigned a monarch who believed he was made of glass. He refused to be touched, sat unmoving for hours, wore iron rods in his clothes to keep from shattering. This wasn't folklore. This was the king. And his kingdom trembled not just from war, but from the silence of his breaking mind. I am Cleo, keeper of the archives. Within these scrolls lie stories too fragile for the textbooks, tales of rulers undone not by battle, but by belief. Tonight, I offer you one such tale of a man crowned in gold, but haunted by the sound of breaking glass. Come closer. Let us open this scroll together. The year was 1380. France was splintered by war and plague, and on to its trembling throne stepped Charles VI, just 11 years old. He was crowned in Reims Cathedral, surrounded by crimson robes and ancient hymns. A golden boy in every sense. Beautiful, gentle, adored. But it was not Charles who ruled. A regency council of uncles, hungry, ambitious, took the reins. They fought, schemed, and taxed the people heavily to fund war with England. Still, the boy king watched and waited. When Charles came of age at 21, he dismissed the regents and placed power in the hands of his loyal friend and advisor, Marquis de Clisson. He ruled with clarity, compassion. For a brief moment, France exhaled. But that clarity would not last. What does it take for the mind of a king to begin unraveling? Is it war, betrayal, or something far more quiet, like fear that slips in through the crown? In the summer of 1392, Charles rode with his men to Brittany. He was tense, agitated. Reports spoke of sleepless nights and whispers in the dark. Then, it happened. As they rode through a forest, a man ran into the path, shouting of betrayal, a mad warning. The king froze, then snapped. Charles drew his sword and turned on his own men, striking down 4 knights before collapsing. When he awoke, he remembered nothing. This was the first recorded psychotic break of Charles VI. The court was horrified. The king, beloved by the people, now stared blankly for days, speaking to no one. These episodes would come again. Waves of fury, confusion, and silence. His doctors, bound by medieval superstition, offered little help. Bloodletting, charms, even holy water. None could stop what was coming. What haunts the corridors of power more than war? Perhaps it is the question that cannot be answered when the king falls ill. Who rules in his place? By the early 1400s, the king's madness took on a strange and haunting form. Charles began to believe, deeply, obsessively, that he was made entirely of glass. He feared that any sudden movement, any touch, would cause him to shatter. He wore reinforced clothing, sat still for hours, refused to let anyone approach without permission. He even ordered iron rods sewn into his garments to prevent breaking. But this delusion was just one shard of a larger fracture. During a terrifying episode in 1393, Charles no longer knew his own name. He did not remember he was king and fled in panic from his own wife. He could not recognize his children, yet somehow he remembered the names of the dead. He called out for them as if the living had become strangers. In later attacks, he would roam his palaces, howling like a wolf, refusing to bathe for months, his mind slipping between silence and savagery. This was not an isolated illness. In medieval Europe, a rare psychological condition known as glass delusion appeared among nobles and scholars, a haunting intersection of power, pressure, and paranoia, but none endured it more visibly than the King of France. Imagine his court, dignitaries kneeling before a monarch who would not rise, who whispered about his body cracking like ice. The king was not removed. He was hidden, shielded, protected, and feared. Is the human mind more delicate than a crown? Or does power itself make us brittle, shaped too finely by expectation, until one day we simply crack? Charles's condition destabilized France. His wife, Queen Isabeau, and his brother, Louis of Orleans, began ruling in his name, but rival factions rose, the Armagnacs and the Burgundians, each claiming to protect the crown while vying for it themselves. Civil war brewed beneath the throne, and the English, they watched. In 1415, England struck with fury at the Battle of Agincourt. France was divided, leaderless, and crushed. By 1418, Paris was in chaos. Murder, betrayal, collapse, and all the while, Charles sat behind closed doors, believing he might break. His reign continued, but in name only. The man who had once offered France hope was now its most fragile secret. Can a kingdom survive when its ruler becomes a myth? And if that myth is built from fear, what remains once it shatters? Charles VI died in 1422 after 42 years on the throne. His mind never fully returned. His legacy was one of tragedy, not for what he did, but for what was done around him while he could not act. His son, Charles VII, would reclaim France and end the 100 Years' War. But history would never forget the Mad King. Not the battles, not the betrayals, not even the war, but the image of a man who sat still in a dark room, fearing that he might shatter. The scrolls do not always speak of victory. Some tales are of survival, of those who ruled not with power, but with the echoes of their breaking minds. Charles VI ruled from within his own prison, a prison shaped not by bars, but by belief. We remember him not to mock, but to listen, to wonder, and to ask. How many rulers in history broke quietly while the world outside still bowed before them? I am Cleo, and this was a story of glass, memory, and the delicate silence of the crown.